So I'm sure many of you remember the days of childhood, running outside, playing with friends, climbing on the jungle gym. And even now you like to have fun outside, maybe grilling the quad or taking the jog around Vanderveer. You must feel great to take a step outside, take a deep breath of fresh air and say, I'm ready to do whatever I want to. A lot of people have trouble taking that first breath of air. Many people put themselves in this position because of their choice to start smoking. Smoking inhibits a person's breathing and affects the respiratory system. But the damage that is done by smoking isn't limited to the smoker. Smokers create something called secondhand smoke. The secondhand smoke is something that tobacco users create where other non-smokers involuntarily inhale the smoke. Secondhand smoke for a non-smoker is just as lethal as a cigarette is for a person who does smoke regularly, and this danger goes double for children. Children have growing susceptible lungs that get irreversible damage done to them because of exposure to secondhand smoke at an early age. The American Lung Association states that secondhand smoke is especially harmful to young children. Secondhand smoke is responsible for between 150,000 to 300,000 lower respiratory tract infections, 7,500 to 15,000 hospitalizations, and 430 sudden infant death syndromes deaths in the U.S. annually. So secondhand smoke is a very serious hazard in the U.S., and children are too young to understand the dangers and how to protect themselves. So today I'd like to explain to you why secondhand smoke is so incredibly dangerous, and especially for children. To start out, I'd like to talk to you about the respiratory system and how we breathe. The respiratory system's primary function is to supply blood with oxygen and to deliver that blood-filled oxygen to the rest of our body so we can function. So to help explain that, I have a picture of the human respiratory system, and you can follow the mouse, but we inhale oxygen through the nasal cavity and the mouth, which is connected to the pharynx and larynx. The larynx is where we produce sound, and it also connects to a larger tube called the trachea. The trachea goes further down into your chest cavity before breaking off into bronchi branches, which are located in your lungs. These branches further split off into the bronchioli branches, and then once again into smaller branches called the alveoli branches. At the ends of these branches are the alveoli sacs. This is where the diffusion of the oxygen we breathe in the air goes into our bloodstream and supplies our body. This exchange of gases is the respiratory system's means of getting oxygen to the blood. But when you're inhaling secondhand smoke chemicals and pollutants that come from cigarettes, you're inhibiting that process from running smoothly. The gunk and pollutants and tar clog up your lungs and inhibit oxygen from properly reaching those alveoli sacs. And to kind of see what a smoker's lungs look like and a non-smoker's lungs, you see the smoker's lungs is full of tar, pollutants, very difficult for the oxygen to reach those sacs, whereas the non-smoker's lungs is crisp and clean and ready to go. The pollutants build up and usually result in chronic coughs. These chronic coughs is the body's response to try to get all this gunk and waste out of your system forcefully and unhealthily. This is how cigarettes inhibit the body from properly extracting the oxygen we breathe through the air. Now you understand how we breathe and how these chemicals can hurt us. I'm going to talk to you more about the specific kind of chemicals that are in secondhand smoke and what they can do to us later on. Some chemicals that are in secondhand smoke are ammonia, benzopyrene, formaldehyde, and hydrogen cyanide. An article by Dr. Lichtenfield, Deputy Chief Medical Officer for the American Cancer Society, talks about how exposure to these specific chemicals through secondhand smoke has immediate adverse effects on the cardiovascular system, which contains the heart, lungs, and arteries. All these chemicals have the potential to greatly harm your body and will continue to do so as long as you continue exposure to secondhand smoke. And children are at an even greater risk because their lungs are still maturing. These chemicals can cause the greatest harm to these developing young lungs. Dr. Goldstein, director at the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, adds that secondhand smoke exposure causes multiple symptoms in children, including asthma, pneumonia, and resulting in thousands of avoidable hospitalizations. This waste that accumulates on your lungs because of these pollutants inhaled can put you at risk for developing chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chest infections, and chronic coughs. Secondhand smoke is deadly to children who have already contracted asthma or lung conditions because it worsens them further. Not only can secondhand smoke create such symptoms in children, but secondhand smoke can also lead to very serious diseases later on in life. There's evidence suggesting that inhaling secondhand smoke at a young age may be linked to diseases such as leukemia, lymphoma, brain tumors, and cancers of the throat, lungs, and heart. An entry from the American Heart Association journal states that secondhand smoke increased the risk of coronary heart disease by 30%. And in a survey taken by all of you responded that you have been in the presence of a smoker and have taken in secondhand smoke at some point in your life. Depending on the level of exposure when you were first inhaling the smoke, you may be putting yourself at great risk for contracting one of these symptoms. But now that you're adults, the risk doesn't stop there. The National Cancer Institute states that approximately 3,000 lung cancer deaths occur each year among adult non-smokers in the U.S. from secondhand smoke. The U.S. General Surgeon estimates that living with a smoker increases a non-smoker's chance of lung cancer by 30%. So non-smoking children that grow up in a smoking house and then go on through life to live with a roommate or a spouse that also likes to smoke greatly increases the risk of contracting one of these symptoms. And I'm sure there have been many non-smokers that have gone through this process and luckily no afflictions, no ailments, and thought, whoa, I was one of the lucky ones, wasn't I? Well, that's what I used to think, but until recently, I was a victim of secondhand smoke myself. For my story, I used to smoke hookah, which is a casual, regular, social kind of event in high school and college. I've never bought a pack of cigarettes, and neither have I smoked it. But I did live in a very smoke-heavy house with my parents. My parents, until my late teens, early high school years, were 30-plus year smokers. And as a child, I was always a witness to that. I was always with them for car rides, dinners, family events, and so I was a witness to their secondhand smoking firsthand. So all those years and all the exposure of taking all that secondhand smoking, I finally suffered for it. And now being 22 years old, a non-smoker, and living in a secondhand smoke-friendly house, I recently contracted exercise-induced asthma. But I can understand why I was exposed to so much smoke as a child. It was a different time where smoking research and awareness wasn't as prevalent as it is today. But with more lenient smoking laws about 25 years ago, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has an ongoing study about the level of cotinine in non-smokers. In 1988 and 1991, 90 of 100 non-smokers had traces of cotinine, which is the breakdown of nicotine that is inhaled through secondhand smoke, in people's systems. Whereas today the number is drastically lowered to 25 out of 100 people. And so, with my breathing problems, I don't get to act out as much as I'd like to, but I'm sure you guys still do. I'm sure you all enjoy running across the football field, maybe through the Lee Loman gym, and trying your hardest and doing your best, but maybe occasionally you have to take a short break. Take that breath in, regroup yourself, and go right back at it with full force. But for me, it's no longer really a possibility. After many appointments with my pulmonary specialist, he finally concluded that my asthma must be due to damage done to my lungs at an early age. And this resulted in damaged growth later on. Now, for most physical activities, I have to puff on this little guy a couple of times before I get into anything. I've had to do this regularly for any sort of physical or event or activity, and so this will prevent me from having an asthma attack and collapsing on the floor and possibly getting the worst critical condition. This is how secondhand smoke has affected my life. So, the effects of secondhand smoke aren't limited to children, but they do the greatest damage to their bodies. Luckily, today's awareness for smoking has improved greatly, and many organizations are taking a stand to fight for a clearer future. Kids caught in these clouds of smoke stand no chance against future diseases caused by secondhand smoke. But hopefully, after hearing what I've said about secondhand smoking, you can understand why secondhand smoke is incredibly dangerous, especially for children. Thank you.